You know, maybe the fourth time instead of the third time will be the charm here. You see, I was trying to talk about this, and even though the NFL season's starting today, and I got the 49er game on in my room right now, and I'll have it on here again in a little bit, I don't have to worry because the Niners are going to take care of business like they always do. But I wanted to talk about the NCAA. Now I know 2 weeks ago, basically Labor Day weekend, essentially the last few days of August and into the first few days of this month, we've pretty much had some good games. We've had some surprises, some blowouts. We've had several FCC teams, FCS teams actually upset some FBS teams, as well as we have seen some of those FCS teams actually play very close games with the FBS teams as well. We've seen it. Like I said, we've seen some upsets, sometimes surprisingly some major blowout upsets, but still we've seen it. But this basically 2013-14 season is a very historic season for college football FBS, Division I, if you will, whatever you want to call it. Due to the fact that it's not only the last year of the BCS era, but it's also the first year that there is two conferences no longer exist in college football. It's true. One conference does actually still live on, but they live on only, they only live on only now in basketball and baseball, and that's about it. And maybe football, and perhaps football, but with only Division I AA. Of course, the conferences I'm talking about are the Big East and the WAC. The WAC, of course, no longer around due to the fact that it had very unlimited schoolings. And some of the schools of the WAC have gone on to different conferences. For example, San Jose State is now part of the Mountain West, as far as I know. So is a few other teams. I think Utah State's part of them as well. If I have my iPod around here, I can pretty much give you a better idea. Hold on for a second. I think I know what's at. But like I said, there have been some teams that have moved into different conferences. But like I said, some teams have moved to different conferences. Like I said, San Jose State, which was a surprise last year for the WAC, is now in a tougher conference with the Mountain West and could do very well there. Another team I think that's in the Mountain West, and I'm going to check that right now, is Utah State, I believe, is in the Mountain West, as well as I think New Mexico State is there as well. Now the Sun Belt also got some, now other teams from the Mountain West also moved on, from the WAC moved on to other conferences besides, the Mountain West Conference. For example, UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio, a school that just began its Division I run last year, its FBS run last year in the WAC, has now moved on to the mid-major known as the Conference USA. What an I'll tell you this, what a first 2 years for that program, huh? In FBS. The fact you start out in the WAC, which is one of the common conferences, which is one of the most which is one of the most known conferences to start out with when you're upgrading, basically, when you're advancing from FCS to FBS. Basically, like I said, it's one of the conferences you're most known for to as your inaugural conference, your introductory conference into the FBS. But what a year for them to go from the WAC now to Conference USA, which isn't a bad thing. You know, it's been proven before that they could do this. It's been proven before that teams like them can come out of nowhere and do this. And like I said, it's not just them either. If I can find some other standings here. Let's take a look at, let's take a look at the Mountain West, for example, see who was added. Okay, we know that San Jose State's in there. Nevada, I believe, is in there for the first time. Maybe, yeah, they're in there for the first time. Utah State, of course, is in there. So Utah State so far is the other new one, along with San Jose State and Nevada, I believe, that are part of this, which, yeah, I guess is pretty good. And now we'll see what Conference USA has. So I was wrong with New Mexico State there, but let's see where they're at. Well, Conference USA has gotten a few new additions as well, it seems. They've gotten Florida International. They've got La Tech, Louisiana Tech is in there, and they came from the WAC conference. North Texas has come from the Sun Belt. Texas San Antonio came from the, Texas San Antonio came from, of course, the WAC as well. And UTEP, I think, was there before, I think in their second year now or something. So that means the Sun Belt has got a few new teams. And when I looked at the Sun Belt basically, to me, has become this generation's, this past decades, if you will, their answer to the former Big West and now formerly, basically, the Sun Belt is basically the answer to the now defunct Big West and now the defunct WAC. Well, basically, their schools will start off in the first few bowls of the year, and if not, end up in the last mid-major bowls into the new year as well. And the teams they got was really surprising. I mean, Texas State, of course, goes from the WAC to Sun Belt. Okay, that's understandable. That's their choice. Arkansas State, I think, has been in the Sun Belt, so they're okay. But here's the two new teams that surprised me. South Alabama and Georgia State. South Alabama, I can understand because I think they've been in FCS school before in football. But Georgia State's like in their second year of football, and in their second year, they're not only in the FBS, but they're part of the Sun Belt Conference. In the most recent game, they got blown out by a FCS school in Chattanooga. Go figure. As far as the MAC goes, let's see who they obtained. MAC is, well, the MAC's got UMass in the group now. That's understandable. So I think that's the only difference there. The FBS, the Independents, see who you guys got. Well, the Independents has grown. This is where some of the teams that didn't get into a conference have ended up as well. And Old Dominion is in it as well. So this is the new part. Okay, for anybody that might not know much about FBS Independents, hold on for a second. Okay, folks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just checking the game there. Still 21-14 Niners, and it's about 3:37 p.m. Pacific. But anyway, for those of you that may not know, for those of you like say my mom that's kind of getting into the know, is kind of learning a little bit more about sport, about football and stuff, but pays more attention to like let's say the NFL and MLB and all that, you know, and basically learning more and more as they watch every game and you know hear what like family members that you know what they're talking about, like my brother-in-law and Modesto does and all that, and myself in particular. Basically, for those of you that are new to well, not new, but are learning what college football is and what college football is all about, and the difference is between the NFL and that, and the different conferences of the college football, especially the bowl conferences, if you will. The independence is basically all the teams involved there. It's wide open. Their schedule is like basically being on the independence allows you to have a schedule of facing whoever is on that schedule. You don't have to worry about, oh, I got to face this person because they're in my conference, or I got to face that person, or that school because they're in my conference. I got to face that school because they're in my conference. No. Independence basically means you can play any school that's on your schedule. Doesn't matter what conference they're in. For example, BYU surprised everybody by beating Texas this past Saturday or yesterday. And normally, if BYU would have remained in the Mountain West or even the WAC, they probably still would have had Texas on the schedule as one of the opening non-conference games. But because that's not the case, you know, they could have played Texas a few weeks from now in the middle of the football season and had the same result, and probably had the same result, well, and everything. And again, that's basically because of the fact the independents are their own individual stuff. They don't worry. The independents basically doesn't have to worry about a conference record. You know, like, okay, they've got, like, overall you've got so many wins, but how many wins do you have in the conference? Like with the conferences, you got to say, like, okay, let's say in the SEC, let's say Alabama, who's a strong favorite this year, like last year. Let's say Alabama has one loss overall, but has no losses in conference. Basically, Alabama would have no losses in conference or in their division of that conference. They would basically win that division. In other words, they could be 10-0 in division play in the conference, win the division, win the SEC championship overall, and thus, even though they would have one loss, just like they showed last year, could be proven as a strong contender for the national title. FBS independent schools don't have to worry about conference records. All they have to worry about is the overall record, like how well they did overall. They don't have to worry about that secondary record of how good they did in the conference or in the division of the conference, and so on. All they have to do is worry about the overall record. That's basically what it is. And that's why a lot of schools sometimes, like BYU did about a couple years ago, and like several of these other schools have done, have chosen to go the route of independence. So that way they can prove themselves against any and all competition. Now, there does come a time when conferences will look to these schools and say, hey, do you want to join us? We got one more spot open if you want to join. Because the more schools they got, the more money comes in for that conference, and the more chances they have for more teams to be eligible for bowls down the line, bowl games down the line. That's basically why teams like this year, like Idaho, New Mexico State, and the now inaugural FBS season, Old Dominion, have chosen to go the independent route. Sometimes they go the independent route because it's a better choice for them to start out to test themselves against those other schools out there, see if they're good enough, and either decide, hey, we want to stay independent, or either decide, hey, we want to go to so-and-so conference so we can actually have a better chance. Because the independents, even though they do guarantee you a shot at being in a bowl game, if you have a bowl eligible record, it's not always the case. You can have 7-5, and be on the independents, and you'll get overlooked. That's the whole deal. You will get overlooked. Let's say, for example, you are 7-5 team out of the independents, and the Texas Bowl or the Houston Bowl, whatever you want to call it, says, okay, we got this team, we want another team to face this team. And one team's out of a conference, right? And you think, oh good, I got the 7-5 record. I got just the record. You think, oh good, my school's got the record to do it. My school that's under the independence has got that record. Guess what happens? They may get overlooked for another team from another conference that has the similar record, but, hold on for a second. But like I said, you could think, okay, my school that's in the independence could have a 7-5 record and all, but even though you think they could have the record to do that, get into that bowl game, they'll get overlooked by a school maybe from a conference, from an actual conference, because of the conference record. You see, that's the disadvantage of being on the independents. You can have a good record, but in the end, you could also get overlooked. And that's what sometimes happens. Unless, of course, you're a school that will go undefeated or semi-undefeated throughout the year. That's the only way you can get a chance in there, into a bowl game, and not be overlooked. And for teams like Idaho and New Mexico State and even Old Dominion, well, let's just say right now, all of them being 0-2, let's just say they better get the acts together if they want to consider getting into any kind of bowl as an at-large, because that's basically what independents are. Schools as being part of the independents are about. You have a bowl eligible record, you can only hope to get into any kind of bowl as an at-large. And it also all depends if a certain conference doesn't have enough bowl eligible teams. But yeah, this is definitely a very historic year for the FBS Division I's of college football because, again, there's no more WAC. The Big East is pretty much regulated to basketball, baseball, track and field, wrestling, and maybe still football, most likely the Division I AA. But overall, it's the first, not only is it the final year of the BCS era, but it's also the first year that there is no more WAC, there is no more Big East, but in the place of the Big East is the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. Now the American Athletic Conference is basically the teams that were part of the Big East. They were originally part of the Big East before this whole situation at the beginning of the year where you had the Catholic schools split off into their own thing as the Catholic Seven, and then eventually renamed themselves the new Big East. But you also have, as part of the American Athletic Conference, you have, not only do you have teams like Louisville, Cincinnati, Rutgers, Connecticut, South Florida, as part of the, basically retained into that conference. Louisville, of course, leaving next year for the ACC. But you also have new members like South Florida. I mean, South Florida was always part of it. What am I talking about? But you have new members like Houston, UCF, SMU, Memphis, and Temple back into the equation. Now, what's funny about Temple is Temple, I think, was independent, was, I think, Big East, then they went independent, then they went MAC, and now they're back as part of the AAC. And you see, that's the example I'm talking about. Temple decided to go indie for a while to test their strengths against other teams. Then they went back into conference play as part of the MAC, because I think they realized they don't have what it takes to compete just yet on that major level, and then they finally got back to the major level. And of course the ACC, I think, has one or two new teams added to theirs. I'm trying to see here. Yeah, they have Pittsburgh, I think, is a part of them now. And I think that's about it. And I think Syracuse as well. Yeah, so Pittsburgh and Syracuse are basically a part of the ACC now. So there you go with that. But the point is, the reason I say this is a very historic year for the FBS is because, like I said, there's two conferences that are defunct, have been recently defunct or changed around. One been rebranded with schools that are not Catholic, or that are non-Catholic schools, along with the addition of some other schools. You've had teams realigned to other conferences and into independence. Georgia State, like to me, is the biggest surprise when it comes to being upgraded or advanced up to the FBS level, because it's a second year, and they just recently got blown out by a team that's not even on the FBS level. You think a team that you would think would have been called up before them. But anyway. The reason this is historic because it'll be the last year that the BCS is going to be around. The bowl games themselves, the BCS bowl games is what they're called. Hold on for a second. Tied at 21 right now, but they're going to take care of business doing that, being the 49ers. They're going to take care of business. It's 3:50 p.m. Pacific, tied at 21. But anyway, point is, ladies and gentlemen, what I was trying to say is, the point is, the bowl games are still going to be around. The only difference is the games, some of the bowl games, like starting in the 2014-15 season, are going to be used as playoff locations. In other words, it'll still be a bowl game. It'll still be like a bowl game. But, in addition to winning that bowl game, the team that wins that bowl game advances on to the national championship. In other words, it's kind of like the NCAA basketball tournament. When you get down to the Final Four, if you will, not the Final Four, but to the Elite Eight. The Elite Eight, basically, when you win your region in the Elite Eight, you move on to the Final Four. And when you win that, you move on to the national championship. So basically, that's what this new system is like. It's like a Final Four. The only thing is, you're going to have a committee that's not going to rely on polls and polls of any kind. They're going to choose basically depending on strength of schedule, weather conditions, stuff like that. You got to look it up yourself. Just go college football playoffs, look it up on Google or Bing, go to Wikipedia, look it up. You'll get more information there. But basically, they're going to look at different things like strength of schedule, weather conditions, stuff like that. And then they're going to decide, okay, what four do we need? And this is going to go all the way to 2025, but I'm not going to be surprised, ladies and gentlemen, that from that for the next 10 years, that for those 10 years that this thing's going to be running, that you're not going to have people wanting to go back to basically the FBS, to the BCS system or something similar to it. And what I'm talking about is I'm not going to be surprised that down the line, when this is all said and done in 2025, if not sooner, we're going to have a system that's similar to the BCS. And basically what that's going to mean, I think the major fix, I think this all could have been avoided, folks. All could have been avoided. Not that I have anything against the playoff system. It's a good thing to test out and see what the results will be. But I think this all could have been avoided, ladies and gentlemen, if the BCS would have whoever was in charge of the BCS rankings would have just shut their mouth, stop lining the pockets with money after money after money after money, would have just shut their mouth and said, you know what, we're going to open the BCS eligibility to all FBS conferences in all FBS schools. Doesn't matter if you're small, mid, or big, we're opening it up to all of you. That's what they should have done, and I think that's why we got this playoff, because they're not opening it up to anybody else. I mean, honestly, you think this playoff thing's going to solve anything? You don't think the committees are not going to go like, I want my team. Here, have some money. Put that team in there, even though they shouldn't be in. Put them in. Do you think they're not going to do that? Of course they are. But basically, what I'm trying to say is the playoff system, the way this is going to work, starting next year, is the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl are going to be the first two bowl games, still treated as bowl games, but the champions of the bowl games will move on to Arlington, Texas to meet for the national title. That's basically how it works. And then the following year, I think it's the Fiesta and the Cotton Bowl that becomes the semifinals, and that's on New Year's Eve. And then the following year on New Year's Eve, you have the Orange and the Chick-fil-A that serve as semifinals. Now, according to what they said as well, the teams that don't make it into the top are not chosen for the playoffs. Basically, those top five or Great Five or whatever they're calling it, as well as a few at-larges, will be chosen as well by that same selection committee. So let's say a Big Ten champion and a Pac-10 champion don't get into the semifinals. They'll be chosen to go either to, let's say maybe the Fiesta Bowl next year or the Orange Bowl, because the Rose Bowl would be taken over as a semifinal. You kind of get the idea. Again, Google college football playoff. Look it up on Wikipedia. You have a better idea of what I'm talking about. In fact, I'll provide a link down below. But that's basically how it's going to work. So that is why this is a very historical year for the college football FBS. Due to the fact that it's the last year of the BCS era, there's no more WAC, and the Big East has basically been reconfigured into the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. So, a lot of big changes, a lot of changes coming. But the thing is, will they be for the better? That's what we all want to know. But basically, this is going to be a very interesting year to look forward to in college football. I thought I'd just give you guys a heads up, even though we're 2 weeks into the season, of what's going to be happening, what's new, what teams have been realigned where, and what to look forward to afterwards. So, and basically also why certain conferences are no longer around. So, let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. Video responses are greatly appreciated. I'll talk to y'all later. I'm going to get back to watching some 49ers.